Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got an incredible guest. She is a mother, a professional, an artist, and so much more. She's one of my favorite people. I have known her for decades. I won't say how long because she just had her 29th birthday, but she's a friend. She's married to my son's godfather, one of my oldest and best friends, and just a wonderful person that is one of the stalwarts of our community. I'm speaking, of course, about Heather Perrin. Heather, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Parker.
Thank you. I know you're a busy mama and you've got work and photography and a million things going on. So I know your time is precious, and I thank you for sharing it with me and our viewers. Why don't we kick things off with you just sharing a little bit about yourself? Just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Well, I born and raised in Ponchatoula. Went to Ponchatoula High School. Graduated in '97, so I guess I'm revealing a little bit about my age there. But,
right.
Went to Southeastern for 3 years, where I was a Phi Mu and
a Phi Mu lady. I married one of them, y'all. That's a good group.
I actually was advisor when Brandy came through. So,
oh, cool. That's cool.
Did a role as that. So Southeastern for 3 years and applied for OT school at LSU in New Orleans and received my degree from there in 2002. So been an OT for 20 years. So
you've been an
now.
Occupational therapist pretty much exactly as long as I've been, an attorney. So yeah, that's cool. I didn't realize we got out of school at the same time, but that's pretty neat. Well, I know that's an important profession. My little boy James gets occupational therapy, and we're fans of all the therapies in our family. We've been through physical therapy, speech therapy, and OT. So, I can't wait to hear more about what you do. I promise we will circle back to your career because it's an important one and an impressive one. And I hear nothing but great things about the way you do that. But before we get there, I want to kind of dig in on early childhood because you mentioned you grew up here. And I happen to know you come from one of my favorite families, the Niehaus family. Shout out to the Niehaus clan. In fact, I saw your cousin, Big Worm, the other day. And I saw him at the Hi-Ho, and it brought me back, more than 20 years, to the good old days when we were at Hi-Ho. Henry, of course, is, a dear friend of our family, and he worked with my dad at the sheriff's office for many years. Great people. But tell us what it was like growing up in the Niehaus family and just what childhood was like, what you did for fun and where y'all went and how you played and all that.
I grew up on Highway 22, actually right behind Henry. He would drive me to school every day if I made it on time. He did not wait for me. So I had to be there on time.
Hey, that's when, cousins is like siblings, right? When it's like, they're not afraid to leave you behind if you're not on time.
Not at all. Not at all. We would shove about 6 people in that little Nissan and it was low riding already. So it was always an adventure to get to school. But I lived behind him in a little house. My parents were very young when they had me, so we lived in a small house that my grandpa had built for his family of 4 children way back when my dad was younger and grew. All 4 of his kids were raised there.
Yeah, well, tell us if you would take us back to your grandpa and maybe just tell, because people know Niehauses and, make sure they know who Nick is and Henry and Nick Kevin and all, would you give us a little who's who and then we get to you?
So, a lot of people were familiar with my great-grandfather, Nick Niehaus. He was a game warden, very high-profile game warden in the area. And also, my mom was a Bates, so I'm from the Bates family. So the Bates and the Niehaus. Yeah.
So that's like both sides of wildlife and fisheries right there. Yeah.
Correct. My other great-grandfather was a game warden as well. So they were very familiar with
I know how much my dad looked up to those men. He was a game warden and president of the Agents Association in the 70s before he was sheriff. And he talks fondly of them all the time. And in fact, when I told him I saw Henry the other day, the first thing he brought up was Mr. Nick, meaning that grandfather you're talking about. So,
we were very close to him. I was very close. I remember growing up back there. I'd go to his house, and by that time my great grandmother had passed away, so he never cleaned. You know, he was a pretty much bachelor at that point. I'd go sweep his house and tell him he was living in filth and count the hay bales that he had out there. And it was a great childhood, really, living in that little house. You know, it just it was a great childhood. I really loved it. I can appreciate it now. You know, when I would have sleepovers, a lot of times it wouldn't fit us all, so we'd have to pop some tents in the backyard and have a bonfire. But well, you know, those were the best times.
You know, you think about it, and I know you're talking about a tiny home, and I know, for example, your first home with Brandon was not big. It was next door to my current home that we're about to move out of, and you know, both of us were plagued with like a single bathroom situation, so we get it. But you know, I look at my kids now, and you don't really get it when you're. I mean, you know, if you're there, and I mean, now you and Brandon live in one of the kind of marquee homes in Ponchatoula. It's big and beautiful. But, you know, until you get there, you don't maybe realize you're in a little, it's just your house, you know, and it's just, it's, if your parents love you and your family's all around and they're, you know, yards to play in, and y'all had a huge one out there, property everywhere. It had to be pretty cool. And of course, I got a quote here I got to share. Brandon Perrin, the famous rocker, country music icon of the Cricket Farmers, is chiming in here to say this is the best looking guest you've ever had on the show. Brandon, you're right. And she is talking to the former worst looking guest we ever had on the show. In our 50th episode, I moved across and Mark Verbois interviewed me. So we've got Beauty and the Beast going here. But I can't argue with that, Brandon. You have outkicked your coverage. Your wife, I've always told you, is way too good looking for you. And you can just thank God's grace that she sees something in you. But we will get into. I'm going to throw more grenades at Brandon Perrin as this interview goes on. It's one of the things I'm most looking forward to. But Brandon, thank you for being a good hubby and tuning in to watch your beautiful wife. And speaking of that, folks, I can see here from the software that well over 20 people are watching live at this moment. So if you want to say something to Heather, if you want to tell her she's beautiful as Brandon did, you know, chime in by all means. If you have a question about photography or occupational therapy or Brandon Perrin's, you know, 12-time champion Holy Board career, her talented children, whatever, feel free to comment here, and I will do my best to share your comment with our viewers as I just did for Brandon. Here is another great-looking young woman, Lily Perrin, and she says, I guess you could say that. Lily, I'm so glad you take after your mom, not your dad. And by the way, I apologize for using your photo you took of your mom without your permission. I should have asked before we downloaded it. Feel free to contact a competent attorney and sue me. You could probably win. So, folks, we're here with Heather Perrin, local occupational therapist, photographer, mom extraordinaire, woman of many talents. And she's talking about growing up in Ponchatoula. And it sounds like you just had a great home life. Parents that while they were young when they had you, they loved you a lot. You had a happy home. You had wonderful family from great grandfather to cousins, all right there, right by you on the family homestead. So what was it like as you got older? You know, eventually we're going to hear about you meeting this rascal Brandon Perrin and all the, you know, the wrong directions he took you, so to speak. But what about, you know, childhood, junior high, anything you want to talk about? Just tell us about kind of growing up in Ponchatoula as you got into school and, you know, got into activities and what were you into?
I've tried my hand at several things before I found my niches, for sure. I was not really, I tried dance. That really wasn't for me. I think I tried out for cheerleading maybe 3 times before I realized maybe that's not for me either.
Hey, you're talking to a guy who kept at it and just couldn't break through in baseball, so I get it.
Right?
I admire that you kept at it.
Finally, I think in high school, I randomly decided that I think I'm going to run track. I've never ran before.
What inspired that? Did you have a friend running? Did you were watching the Olympics? What caused
I just felt like I needed to do something. I had to do something, and cheer wasn't it for me. So I decided to take up track, and I went out there never having run before, and I wasn't very good at it, but I made a lot of friends, and it was a social event for me. And I mean, I'm a social person, so
Absolutely. Well, you know,
I
it's
ran
funny you
track
mentioned.
with Miss Brescher said after that, because she was the coach at the time, she was like, she put me in distance. She's like, you're going to run cross country. I'm like, no, I'm not. But then I did. And then that's where I met Brandon.
And now you're a cross country mama. I know you had I know you're in a good one. I know you went all the way to Baton Rouge today to watch him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Can you give us a report on how the Ponchatoula High team did?
I think they did excellent. We're going to state, so that's wonderful. The boys and the girls both qualified for state. So
way to go. You heard it here first. And speaking of state runners, Jennifer House Drake, your PHS teammate and state champion, she and Amanda Bridges Richard were outrunning everybody in the state back in the day, if I recall. And so she's chimed in here to say distance runners are the best. I agree with that, you know, because I'm now the dad of one. And your son Trent and his dad Brandon were kind enough. Brandon is my son's godfather. They were kind enough to come out and watch the St. Joe boys run at a meet in Hammond. In fact, Brandon had two godchildren, on the team.
Yeah.
And that was kind of neat. And our buddy Will's son beat my son, and that surprised no one. But speaking of enjoying it, despite not, say being a state champion like Jennifer or Amanda, my wife also ran track in high school, and she came in dead last in every race she ever ran. And so although Luke did not outrun his buddy Fisher, he did not come in last in any of his meets, and he kept getting faster throughout the season. So, you don't have to win the race to have fun and to contribute to the team. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, well, tell us about that experience. You ran.
Trent just beat Brandon's time. So he's got a big head to live with now.
He's got the family personal record now. Well, good for him. Now, the thing about Trent is he's a practice makes perfect kid. I mean, we all remember when you guys lived next door to me, he would be up, to my wife's chagrin, at dawn, it seemed like, shooting free throws and playing basketball. So he's never been afraid of hard work. And it's great to see him thrive along with his teammates. You guys, as I mentioned, y'all had a ton of success. Your team, was really talented. You two of your closest friends were two of the best runners in the state. What was that like, being on a team with state champions and kind of running around the state and whipping people?
Well, I didn't run on that team. I was on the JV team.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I did get to go with them and cheer them on. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, those relationships, we've stayed close. We have a book club now these friendships, when they start that young, it's just a phenomenal thing, and it's rare, you're lucky enough to have it. I'm lucky enough to have it.
For sure.
I know a lot of people don't, so I don't take that for granted, for sure.
And, I've gotten in trouble before for blasting your husband for being a bench warmer with me at St. Joe. But, we had as much fun sitting on the bench with our pal Jason Kramer, watching Chad Richard and Ben Perrin and all these other guys win a basketball championship. And Brandon, I hope you're mad at me once again. Brandon was better than I was, but, Chad and Ben were the stars of that show. But it is neat to kind of see those relationships endure all these years later. Speaking of old relationships that are still going strong, we've got our buddy Mark Verbois here, who you and I went to school with. And he says that Ponchatoula is lucky to have such a talented person as you, Heather, to call our own. You're part of a great family and part of our school system as well. And you and Brandon are raising some awesome and talented kids. And of course, Mark, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Thank you for tuning in. Miss Debbie Gildner is watching. We've seen her daughter-in-law, Dr. Crystal Gildner, come on the show before. Miss Debbie, I hope you and your boys and all your grandkids and daughters-in-law are all doing well. And our pal Mandy Franks Braywick, who's a former guest on the show and knows a lot about cross country. Her son was out there running fast for the St. Joe Crusaders at the meets. She's tuned in too, and she says, hey. So, Mandy, thank you for chiming in. We're here, folks, with Heather Perrin. We've been talking about PHS and running track and all the fun stuff that goes with that. Who were your friends back then? Obviously, Howes or now Drake. Jennifer has chimed in to say hey. And, I think I mentioned Amanda Bridges Richard. I know y'all were buddies. Who else did you run with kind of figuratively as friends? Who did you pal around with as a youngin'?
Dana Damiano,
Oh yeah, I
Emily
love Dana.
Boudere, Sarah LaCroix, Rachel Garino, Perrin.
Yeah.
So all the same people that I hang and run with now, really.
That's your book club, and you
Yes.
guys are known for like the best. What is it, charcuterie? Y'all have, yeah, you're known to have really, really good parties. Lots of good food, good tasting wine. Y'all seem to do it right.
I don't cook very well, Parker. So this is kind of how my thing with the boards came about. I can visually make something look pretty if I don't have to cook it. So that's
where did you discover the concept of the boards and all? Because you really do. I mean, like from the fine wood to, it's over the top with the nuts and meats and cheeses.
It's really gotten out of hand.
It's pretty awesome. I mean, my mom, who loves that stuff, is just always blown away every time she sees one of yours. But do you remember the first time you kind of saw, because growing up in Ponchatoula, I didn't really see much of that going around. It seems to be kind of a newer, more of a yuppie type concept. So how'd you get started in that?
I think we had gone to a concert with Tori and Jason, maybe Clint Black a long time ago. And Tori.
So this is your sister-in-law,
Tori.
Okay, I'm just clarifying. Thank you. Go ahead.
And she brought, I don't know, a pack of crackers, a pack of cheese, and some grapes, and put it on a plate. And that was like the best thing ever. And we had some wine before the concert. I said, this is how we're going to live from now on. This is where it's at. So, it's kind of taken off from there. We just do it for our family events and the parties that we have. And
well, you might see your husband's godson coming by if you keep that up, because Luke is really into the Lunchable at this point. Wow. Brandy went and visited him for lunch today at St. Joe, and that was his big request. He wanted the turkey Lunchable.
I got you.
I don't think he realizes yet you can do it with gourmet cheeses and stuff like you do. So you'll blow his mind if he ever sees that spread. Our friend Melissa Doty Stanga says that you are one of her most talented friends and the best charcuterie board maker in the parish. Agreed.
Melissa's in my beach group. I have several circles, small circles that are
So the beach group, these are the girls that travel, right?
We travel. Book club can get there though. We're but we do the beach once a year and make it a point to, and we're actually going this month for Melissa's birthday to Sedona. So very excited about that trip.
That's going to be fun. So which group is Catherine Poche in? Where does she fit in the mix?
Catherine is in a league of her own.
That's your girl. I know.
Yes. So she's my travel buddy for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Best friend, travel buddy.
She's
buddy.
Great. Yeah, you couldn't have a better one than her. No. She and her rotten husband Brad Poche are quite a pair.
We have quite a lot in common. So
speaking of good women and men who have outkicked their coverage, and look, it takes one to know one. I fully admit I'm in that group with those boys. But let's circle back to meeting Brandon, because I think you mentioned y'all met in cross country. And I want to hear about my boy's game. I want to hear about how he pulled this off, because I got to say it was a bit of a head scratcher. But I mean, when, Ben Perrin dated Rachel Garino, that made sense. When Chad Richard got with Amanda Bridges, that made sense. Those guys had game. They were all, So how did Brandon win your heart? Let's share some love story intel here.
Yeah, the first time I ever saw Brandon, I was down the river with Emily Boudere, Hatfield. We rode past the camp.
I love her.
Going to a holy board tournament. First one ever.
The holy board, of course, the 12-time champ.
This time.
Well, see, he was probably already like a 4-time champ by then. He started winning as a kid. Okay.
So we rode past Miss Atherley's camp. That's his grandma's camp, and he was sitting on the wharf fishing. And Emily was like, "There's BB," and that's the only time that I saw him. Then I don't even remember hanging out at the holy board tournament or anything like that. But anyway, 14 cross country sophomore year. Actually, Jennifer Drake's back involved here.
Oh wow.
Brandon brought her to school every day. So one day I guess he asked about me, and she asked me. She's like, "So what do you think about Brandon Perrin?" And I'm like, "Okay, I was 14,
why was she riding with Brandon? Where was Charlie House at that time? Shouldn't he
maybe they all rode together. I don't know. Charlie was already graduated because this was their senior year.
She brings him up because Emily is like the fairy godmother of Ponchatoula. She introduced Brandy and me at the Strawberry Festival. So hearing that she's at the Holy Board tournament with you, I mean, we might find out one day that she's really got fairy wings and Tinkerbell dust or whatever. That's that's pretty cool. So House mentions, Jennifer says, "Hey, what do you think of Brandon?" What's the response? At that point, you kind of had an idea. You sized him up, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was cute, and I was willing to give it a shot. And so I think I had a party coming up at my house. I always had the parties at my house, still do.
Right.
So he talked to me that night at the bonfire that I had. So, and then asked me to a football game a week or so later, and then here we are.
And here we are all these years later. True love. What do you know now? Did he put Jennifer up to it, or was this her idea?
I think so. No, I think he asked about me and asked her.
Yeah, put some feelers out there.
Yeah.
Nice thinking.
I think I could have that wrong, but that's what they told me.
Hey, he has an opportunity to come on the show and tell his side. Brandy and I don't agree. I always say that, you know, through Emily, she asked me out first. Nobody believes that, but I'll stick to that story. But that's really cool. So you guys meet in high school, you know, young love. Y'all go off. Both of you end up at LSU. You know, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was kind of everything. We were separate everywhere we went because I was still in high school. He was a senior. I was a sophomore. So when he graduated, he went to Southeastern. So I still had 2 years of high school. And then when I got to Southeastern, he had to go to LSU for his major. So then he was in Baton Rouge. I was in Hammond, did the Phi Mu thing. And then when he came back home to work, I had to go to New Orleans for 2 years for school. So we finally ended up back in the same place.
It's like he was running away from you or something.
You would think.
He's chiming in here. He does say that your report sounds pretty accurate so far. So we've got some confirmation. I think you're just saying that, Brandon, so that I won't drag you on the show to interview you. And I want to thank the 12-time Holy Board champion for chiming in. Well, before the show, we were joking. I said he was the Michael Jordan of Holy Board. But of course, that's kind of an insult to Brandon because Michael Jordan only has 6 titles, and Brandon. So maybe you're the Michael Phelps of Holy Board, which makes sense since you were Michael Phelps for Halloween some years ago. That's pretty cool. I got Brad Poche, checking in here. He says he better log off. Poche, I'm done picking on you, so you can keep watching. Gary Stanga has chimed in. He says he's running out of walls to put pictures.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Big supporter. I appreciate it.
He's the best. We love Gary. He did an interview here, so I would recommend you go check that out if you have time. That's really neat. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I know Lily's watching them, and she probably enjoys hearing about mom and dad, falling in love in the good old days. But that's something we always get a lot of positive feedback on the show is kind of the stories of young love. And you and Brandon sure have a neat one. Eventually, you guys, I know that when I moved back to town in 2002, so when you graduate OT school and I graduate law school, I buy a little house on the corner of 8th Street. And what was the street y'all lived on?
Oh goodness, now I'm gonna draw a blank.
Is it Cypress?
North Cypress.
Okay, so I've only lived there 20 years, and I'm a half a block away, and I confuse it with Oak sometime. But long story short, my backyard backed up to your backyard, and so it was kind of neat because Brandon and his best friend Jason Kramer lived next to each other, and both of their yards backed up to my yard, and the three of us had been in school from kindergarten at St. Joseph through 12th grade at Ponchatoula. So it was kind of neat. You guys by then were a bit ahead of me, raising this beautiful little family, and Trent and Lily were little bitty pipsqueaks at the time.
Yeah.
But what was life like once y'all kind of got going as adults? You know, you mentioned kind of these transitions where Brandon kept running from you as you went from school to school and town to town, but eventually you made your way back here. Tell us a little bit about that, if you will.
Yeah, so I actually, when I graduated, started working at North Oaks in the CMR unit on rehab, which you know, at the time was my dream job. I loved it. I loved rehab. I loved North Oaks. I loved the people I worked with. It was wonderful.
Could you
So
tell us a little bit about what CMR is for folks that aren't quite as familiar with
CMR
it?
is comprehensive medical rehabilitation. So it's
Okay.
where if you have a total hip or a total knee replacement, or you have a stroke or a spinal cord injury, or you've just been in the hospital for a long time and you can't quite go home yet, you go there for a couple weeks. It's an inpatient rehab unit. You stay and you get PT, OT, speech to kind of get you back on your feet before you can go home.
Right.
So I loved it. I loved working with my older people, but we didn't always get older people. We got younger people too. So it was a great learning experience for me and a great step in my career for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up leaving North Oaks to do home health. Just needed a little more flexibility with the family.
And how long ago did you make that transition?
Oh goodness. So Lily, I was there for 10 years. So probably 10 years ago, I left North Oaks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Home health for maybe 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
But
And
I
I hear that's quite an
5
adventure. You know, Carrie, my ex-sister-in-law did home health as an occupational therapist, and she used to come home with some stories. So
Yes.
I don't know if you've got to pack, you know, a 9mm or a mace or both or what, but it sounds like it can get sometimes scary and often interesting.
It was, and I can't say a lot of the stories on here.
Sure, of
But,
course.
no, it was definitely, I carried pink pepper spray. I don't know how much that protected me, but most of the people we saw were very nice. But you definitely come home with some stories. You don't really realize how people live, and it's very eye-opening, and I'm very, very thankful that I did it, because it just gave me a whole new perspective on life and people's struggles, you know. So
well, yeah, I'm sure it made you appreciate, you know,
absolutely
the home you grew up in and the home you're raising your children in, seeing folks with less.
Yes, absolutely. So I did that about 5 years, and then transitioned to the school system. It kind of opened up at a good time for me. I was looking to get out of home health just because the world's changing, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And I wanted the kids' schedule. I wanted to be there for them more, and so it was a different avenue in my career. I had worked with older people mostly, so transition into pediatrics and school age was like learning everything again. But it was I love it. I love it. I love the people I work with. I love the kids. It's very, very rewarding. So it was a great move for me.
And where are you doing it now, so folks know that, you know, how you're serving our local community?
I work for the TNG school system. I work at Hammond West Side, Midway Elementary. I see kids at Holy Ghost, Courtney Christian. There's about 12 of us that are OTs, 10 and 2 evaluators. So we cover the entire parish, but those are the schools that I work at.
Yeah. So it sounds like, even though we're talking very different professions in OT for you, or say clinical social work, and, you know, which my wife does, the kind of patterns of how and where y'all work can be real similar, because she's worked for years in school systems, in her case Livingston, but it kind of sounds like the same thing. They have a team that covers the parish, and then individual therapists will be assigned to individual schools, maybe as part of a team, but cover some but not all schools. That's pretty neat. We got other folks checking in here. My old classmate and your dear friend Brandy Willie Daniels says that you're her bestie. Brandy, I hope you're doing well. Please say hello to your parents for me. It sure is fun to see your nieces and nephews on Sunday, and your family is one that's one of my favorites. So we're talking about work a little bit here. Let's take a quick opportunity to get real basic for folks that don't understand what occupational therapy is, because I got to tell you, at 45, with having had a sister-in-law that does it, you know, have a kid who's gone through it, and had many clients that needed it, you know, as an injury lawyer, I now have some grasp of it. But I got to admit, I probably didn't know what it was 20 years ago when I moved in next to you. And I just knew that, you know, you'd wear scrubs and it was medical related, and you could have been a dental hygienist, a physical therapist, or a nurse. I wouldn't know. So for folks that don't know, if you would dumb it down for us and tell us what occupational therapy is.
Basically, and we get called everything. We're the physical therapist, we're the nurse, we're never the OT. It's part of the job because a lot of people don't know what we do. But it is basically, now what I do in the school system is completely different than a medical model. But in the hospital, we work not just, we don't treat just the physical aspect. We look at the whole person. So if a person is in rehab, our job, physical therapy, is going to get them to walk again. We have a part in that, but for the most part, we're looking at what do they have to do when they get home? Do they have to feed their cat at night? Do they have to get themselves in and out of a bathtub? Are they able to fix themselves a sandwich? Do they have to do their laundry? Can they walk from their bedroom to the hallway without taking a break in the middle? So we really just try to see the person's whole and give them strategies to be able to go home as independent as possible. So that's a medical model in a rehab setting. In a educational setting, it's completely different. We don't treat the medical model. We are there to support the teachers and the child's academic needs. So whether that be fine motor issues that they're having with handwriting, or if they have ADHD and they can't sit still to focus in a classroom, we can provide strategies for that. Maybe just something as simple as sitting on a disc that they can wobble on and get those wiggles out and still pay attention in class. Or we can give them a built-up pencil. Or we work a lot with autistic kids and trying to develop strategies for them to be successful in the classroom. So we kind of work under a teacher. We are a related service. So whatever the teacher's goals for the child, we come in to support those goals and see what the child needs and help them become successful in their academics.
Super important stuff. So it sounds like whether you're in the medical world dealing with an old person who just had surgery, or in a school dealing with a young person learning to read, write, and do arithmetic, you're trying to help them solve life's problems. And maybe it's a little harder for them because of, their condition to do those things. But whether it's brushing their teeth or writing with a pencil or, zipping up their pants or whatever they have to do, you're helping them figure out how to do it, which I guess it becomes a real complicated thing because each one of your patients is different, right?
Correct.
So
yes.
You might have the same, you mentioned autism. And I remember one thing my wife's told me, from her career as a clinical social worker, as a mental health therapist, is that, if you met one autistic kid, that means you've met one autistic kid, right? Meaning that they're not in any way all the same and each one needs their own individual approach. Is that an accurate way to put it? Or
very accurate. Very accurate. They call it a spectrum for a reason. Every kid is in a different place along that spectrum. And they all have different needs. So it is putting a puzzle together to kind of figure out what suits them best and to help them be successful. So it's a challenge, but it also sparks my creativity. You have to think out of the box. So I think that's where
it's got to be rewarding too. I mean, is it rewarding when you see a kid make progress and be able to do something they couldn't do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a fulfilling career for sure.
That's cool. Well, as somebody whose own family has needed that service, I thank you. I know how important it is. And it's good to see somebody I know to be brilliant, good-hearted, and just fun to be around, for folks that are in maybe what's a challenging situation. But you mentioned that it sparks your creative energy. And that's something I want to talk to you about because, while many of us don't maybe or didn't know what you do professionally, just about everybody that knows you knows what you do creatively, because recently you had this big exhibit at Twin Steeples. It was very successful. People can look to social media and see tons of photos and, there's a lot of buzz. There's just a big deal. And I'd love to hear about that specifically. But before we get there, tell us about what you're into creatively, because your photography is phenomenal. And I know that's not the only artistic pursuit you have, but tell us about kind of how that all got started and when you realized you were an artist and wanted to be a photographer, and how did you get from getting started to being world class?
Well, that's a stretch, but I will start from, I've always loved to take pictures. As far back as I can remember, I've had a camera in my hand. I think in general, my biggest fear is time. Time, you don't have a handle on it. It's going to run out. So something about capturing a moment in time just intrigues me. So my poor family has a camera in their face constantly, and sometimes they're okay with it, and sometimes they're not. But I live with the fact that they'll thank me later.
Yes, if Brandon's anything like me, it's they're thankful, but only after the fact.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
you can look here behind me and see these. You know, one's just my beautiful wife with her wedding, but that photo above it was taken in Big Sur, and I love it. Every day it brings me joy to see that photo. There are many others all over my office. But man, in the day of, I got to admit, I was griping about it, about having to get dressed and carry kids and all this. And, you know, there have been all these sessions of getting up early in the morning to make the Brooklyn Bridge before foot traffic or what. And so I think a little bit relate to what you're saying. Have your families always been good troopers about it from kind of day one, or was it an acquired taste?
No, they're not good troopers.
Still not.
I think they would be at this point, but not really.
That will make Brandy smile, because it's good to know. You know, what do they say? Misery loves company. She's not the only one.
Definitely. But so I
Brandon says it's a struggle here, and Lily says my cheeks always hurt after smiling so much.
Oh, they love it. That's good. So
sorry,
I mean, obviously, I take a lot of pictures of them, but the whole my true passion, what I love to do is the nature and the landscape.
Right.
And
the stuff you take down the river is amazing.
I've always grown up going down the river. We had a camp on South Pass when I was a child. My grandpa, Charlie Bates, had a family camp over there. So we would go down. So that kind of, I always loved it over there. But then we've had a camp on Tangipahoa River since Brandon and I got married. And even before that, we would go down and stay at his grandma's camp. So I just always would bring the camera with me, and you know, if we go fishing and the fish aren't biting, which a lot of times they weren't, I would just whip out the camera and I can entertain myself for hours. So that's kind of how it started, and I would post a picture here or there, and people would feedback on it, and it's just something that kept me busy, and I love to do it. But then it kind of, people along the way would encourage me to do more, and so I self-taught. I had no formal training on photography.
Do you remember when you started to notice that appreciation coming from the community? I mean, it sounds like, you know, getting no love at home, just resistance from the kiddos and your husband, as probably all great struggling artists do. But do you remember when you started noticing maybe a trend, you know, or repeated, or maybe just the first person, like, wow, so-and-so asked me to print a copy of mine, or so-and-so paid me. Do you remember the first time you were paid for a photograph? Things like that.
Casey at Shea La Rue, Brandon's cousin, Casey Perrin.
Yeah, Casey Perrin. She's done an interview on the show. Great woman.
She was doing a house, and she wanted a picture of an egret. So she actually, I think, was the first print that I had sold for one of her interior design jobs. And I had no idea, like, self-taught. I didn't know, I'm not very techie. I can take the picture, I can edit it, make it look beautiful, but blowing it up and the whole technology behind it was a struggle for me to like grasp and get my hands on. So finally, when and I have to give a lot of credit, Miss Kim Zabia, I will get back to the art, but with the photography, she kind of pushed me along, and she was, you know, heading up twin steeples and getting all that while it was under construction, setting up things. And she had called one night and she said, you know, I want you to come and do an exhibit, pick a month. I know you're busy, and we want you to do an exhibit with your photography. And while you're doing
how did that feel to get that call? After doing it for
pretty
years?
Amazing. I felt very humbled and very honored, and I was like, wow, me? Are you sure? But so she pushed me to do that, and then she said, it was kind of neat because she's like, and while you do that, we want Brandon to come play the same month guitar and sing, because I'm an over poster and I post.
So was it? Did they invite? Were the cricket farmers actually an item yet, or was he still solo act?
So this is how it came to be. Well, they were always an item. They play together. That kind of transforms.
Right. And so, can you tell us quickly who the cricket farmers are? I should have probably done that up front.
So that is my husband Brandon and his cousin Wesley Watkins. So they would, the
greatest two-man band on earth, if we know it.
Yeah, so she was like, I want Brandon to come play, and he's like, well, I'm not going to do it without Wes. So he called Wes, and they kind of agreed on it, and then they were like, they were just as excited as I was about this. They, a year long prepared a playlist, and then, it kind of then they had to have a name, so they came up with the Cricket Farmers, and there is
then they got
a store.
T-shirts and band and you know, gigs and dates and everything.
Yeah. Mostly backyard Halloween parties and birthday parties.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The annual Brandon Perrin camp out. I hear they may even make an appearance there.
Oh yeah, that's a definite. It's on the tour date, so it'll be there. But,
hey, I got to share this with you here. Lily has a great comment about your photography. She says, I encourage the landscape photography, not where they have to pose.
She actually is, and she's the talent here. You'll have to get her on her.
Well, I want to, you know, folks, as I kind of alluded to earlier, that wonderful headshot of Heather that's shared for this event on Facebook was taken by Lily, and it's beautiful. And also I want to say, you mentioned she's the talent. Clerk of Court Gary Stenga agrees. He says Lily is very talented as well. Also, go ahead, Heather. I'm sorry.
She's just and Miss Kim. So when we did the exhibit, I knew Lily was super talented, and I know I'm a little biased, but I think she really is super talented.
Hey, just because you're biased doesn't mean you're wrong. You're absolutely right.
So Miss Kim loves Lily, and I had mentioned to her, I wanted to kind of surprise her and put one of her pictures up along with my exhibit. And Miss Kim was like, no, she's getting her own. We'll give her her own exhibit. She had seen. So, and we got to do it together, which was super special. Like, you know, Brandon playing that month and me and Lily having the exhibit, and Trent was our biggest cheerleader. And so it was really special. And then, you know, so we had that, and then Miss Kim, again, she's very persuasive.
Yes, very persistent.
She has a way. So she kind of talked me into doing the art market that they had recently at the beginning of October. So that was
so tell us about that for folks not familiar with the art market. What is that?
It was a juried show, which means there's people that pick out of applicants to show their art there. It's got to be fine art, photography, handmade. So we did that. Lily had prints available. I had prints and frame prints, and it was a lot of fun. And just to do it with her was super special.
Yeah, so cool.
We actually got best in show, so we were very, very excited with our booth.
That's great. Congratulations. I got a quick practical question on that front. How does the money work there? Do you let Lily spend the money she makes here, or do y'all force her to save it? Is that a big controversial topic at the house? How's that go over?
She's a spender. She is a spender. she puts some away, but she buys books. I can't argue with that. She loves. She's
well, so that's not an expense. That's an investment. That's an investment in her education.
Right.
I know she comes from hearty savers, so that's good to hear that Uncle Duke Brandon's letting her spend $1 here. She says Lily comments that she likes to shop and read. What can she say? Thanks for keeping it real, Lily. We've got another comment I want to share here with you, Heather, from somebody that I really admire and like a lot, but I see here that you don't know personally, Miss Faye Ivaniski, who's watched our show pretty often and has been kind enough to comment in past episodes. She says she doesn't know you personally, but your photos and paintings are phenomenal. She says, wow.
Thank you so much, Miss Faye.
Miss Faye, thank you for sharing that. You're always so sweet and encouraging. And of course, you're spot on right here. Heather, what I want to ask you now is kind of an advice-oriented question. So if you were to speak with a young woman or young boy who, just anybody who wants to get into the arts, whether it be photography, painting, music, like your husband, whatever, what type of advice might you give them? Maybe if it were Lily's friend or Trent's friend, or maybe somebody a little older, a young woman, a young mom, but somebody who feels that artistic itch, what would you say to them?
I would just say to play and to try and don't limit yourself. I know confidence is a big thing for me. I always tend to downplay what I can do. So I'm trying to get past that. So don't downplay your talents. And don't be afraid to say no. Like sometimes it's hard. People want you to do this and want you to do that. And don't be afraid to say no. You have to keep it a hobby, keep it fun.
Absolutely,
if that's not
you got to set boundaries.
Yeah. So you have to love it and enjoy it, and don't make it work.
That's great advice. Well, speaking of boundaries, I know I promised I'd get you out of here at a decent hour, and I've kept you for almost 45 minutes. But before we close down, I want to ask you if there's anything else on your mind, on your heart, just anything at all that you'd like to say to our viewers, our listeners, anything you want to share with our community.
I just want to thank everyone for the love and support. I've been humbled and just the outpouring of support and showing up for my exhibits and the comments and just the it's just humbling. Like, I'm so thankful for our community and everyone that's shown some love and support to me, to Lily, to Brain, the whole family. Like, we really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun and makes it fun for me, for sure.
I've joked in past episodes, there are more Perrins than anything in Ponchatoula. I do think it's the single biggest, most numerous family in town. But I got to say, they're none better than you guys. And I don't say that as a diss to the other parent. We mentioned earlier, Casey Perrin, Robert, she's been on the show, and, all these other great parents. But you and Brandon have something special in your family, and your kids are really special. And I really thank you for sharing that glimpse into your world, into your life with our viewers, because I've been fortunate enough to know him my whole life and you most of it, and live next to y'all for a big part of it and get to kind of see it up close and personal. But it's kind of cool here now that you shared this with the town. And I got to say, I don't know if this is the most people watching live ever or the most comments. I don't really keep track or comment, but I do know this is a lot. I mean, you have a lot of interest here, a lot of buzz. In fact, comments are still coming in. So we'll close with a few. Joe Meir, thank you, Joe, for watching. Getting some Hammond action here. He says, this is what Tangi's all about. And Joe, of course, you're right on. And we'll close with a mutual friend of both yours and mine. Heather Sharon Miller says that you are just as sweet and kind as you are talented.
Thank you, Sharon.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Sharon. So thank you for saying that to our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. To Heather, thank you most of all for sharing your time. And to Brandon and Lily and Trent at home, Mom will see you soon. Thank you all. Y'all have a good day.